heard of Logan before, I just wanted to give you a quick introduction. We were founded in 1992, and we have been implementing and supporting our ERP customers for over 27 years. We're headquartered in Chicago. However, we deploy roughly over 80 consultants a year worldwide on our ERP-related projects. And although our experience expands over many industries, we specialize in manufacturing, distribution, and professional services. We support our Dynamics AX and 365 customers with assessments, implementations, upgrades, and optimizations of their systems, harnessing a business process-focused methodology. And as previously stated, we are an ERP Gold partner since 2003 and very active in the AXUG and D365 UG member and contributor since 2014. And as Julie has already stated, Logan is represented today by Chris Rusing, who's one of our senior AX and 365 F&O consultants. And Chris will be conducting the rest of today's presentation and demo. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Okay, thanks, Jared. Just want to make sure you guys can hear me right now. Jared or Julie, can you guys hear me?
Yep, you sound great. Move ahead.
All right, thanks. So kind of diving right into our agenda that Jared just described earlier, the first thing we're going to just talk about briefly is financial dimensions in account structures. So as many of you know, financial dimensions are kind of what really create your account structures. They're basically the account segments within your account string. And there's two main types of financial dimensions. There's the custom ones, which basically you can create a financial dimension called anything and then create the values for that financial dimension. And then there's also entity-backed financial dimensions, which is can be kind of two different sets of those. So the first type is those operating units, which is the kind of out of the box. You've seen before, the departments, the business units, things of that nature. And then there's also the entity-backed ones that are more within backing from records of the system. So customers or vendors or items or projects. Those are those type of dimensions. And really what, the financial dimensions and account structures, it gives you a guide to maximize the value of your financial reporting. So you can really kind of maneuver your users to posting to the dimensions that you want them to post to. You can avoid main accounts that you don't want them to post to. But the thing with account structures is that once you set them up, they're pretty rigid. You don't really want to change them much. And for that kind of purposes, this is where some of the stuff I'm going to talk about today will help. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is derived dimensions. So derived dimensions is a new tool that came out in D365. And it's been available since the 8.1 update, which if you're on D365, then you probably had to move on from 8.1 already, and maybe some of you are on 10.0. But it's basically a tool to guide users to entering the dimension based on the prior dimension that they picked before. So for example, if we selected a certain main account and then a business unit, whatever the business unit that we selected, a department dimension will be suggested. So this keeps your account structure flexible yet powerful because it's already guiding your users to the dimensions that you want them to pick. Where this can be used, obviously with general journal entries, when you're manually entering journal entries, it's very useful to guide your users to certain dimensions. Also, offset of AP invoices. So when you're hitting that expense account and you're entering manual open AP, you want your users to basically, if they choose this expense account and then this dimension, you can guide them to which dimension should be chosen. And then also free text invoices on the accounts receivable side. So as I said before, users can choose the dimension suggested or select another dimension available. There are some settings within derived dimensions, though, that we can kind of play around with that. So one is the replace existing dimension values with derived values. If that is checked, then changing the first dimension will change all segments within the account string. So basically, if we have a certain derived dimension for one business unit, but we change that business unit to a different one, then that will change the remaining derived dimensions that go along the account string. And that will make a lot more sense so once I demo it, but just keep it in mind. And then the other thing I want to mention is preventing changes on certain segments. So it's no longer a suggestion. You absolutely have to use this dimension when you select another dimension. So we can basically lock down the dimension that's being chosen for the user. And I think the nice thing about this is that it allows, you know, flexibility that we want to lock down certain segments, or you know, without going the way of the account structure where you have to put it in draft status and validate and activate it. This just kind of does it on the fly, but still guides the users to only use certain dimensions. So the other thing I want to talk about is default dimensions. And default dimensions are those entity-backed dimensions that use master records, such as customers, vendors, items, and projects. This also was included in the update to 8.1. So if you're on 8.1 or later, then you should be able to use this functionality. Another part of this default dimensions is the checking of the box, copying values to this dimension on each new quote-unquote dimension name created. So basically, each time a new master record is created, that corresponding financial dimension is automatically added to that record. So if you created a new customer and you had the customer dimension clicked active for this default dimension, then once you create that customer, you'll see a financial dimension of that customer on the record. So it's really great because it kind of keeps users in line that they're whatever record they create, they don't have to think about adding a dimension to. They just automatically use the dimension of that record. And it's really useful for items and also projects if you're creating a lot of items and projects. In the example I'm going to show in the demo, we're going to use a project, so you'll see how that can be done there. So without further ado, let me get into the demo. So this is, I believe we're on a 10.0 version. So if you haven't seen 10.0, this is kind of what it looks like. Yep, we are on 10, update 24. So I think the latest was update 26 that's coming out depending on where you're at, but that's where we're at. So the first thing we're going to look at is that the default dimensions. So let me go to my general ledger and then go to my financial dimensions. And I apologize if this system's a little slow. It's our demo, so it's always not the quickest as a live production environment. And I'm going to go to my project dimension. So you can see that this dimension is an entity-backed dimension because it says use values from projects. So basically it's saying that we are going to use whatever projects are created within this legal entity as our dimension values. And then also right here I have copy values to this dimension on each new project that's created. So basically each time I create a project, that dimension value that's also created will be copied to that record. So let's go into projects to kind of look at how that's done. So we'll go to our project management accounting module and go to all projects. And I'll click new. And once this project comes up, I'm going to create a time and material project, and we'll call this XUG project, and we'll choose a project ID, contract ID. And so I'm going to create this project. You can see the project ID right there is 00211. That is actually going to be what the financial dimension value will be that's created. And the powerful thing about this is that once you have that project ID on the project, then it will flow through to the transactions for that project. So it then you can see that project in your trial balance, and you know that your data is consistent because you know that the project ID will always be copied onto that project record. So once this is created, we can take a look at the financial dimension that's been assigned. So here we have our project ID right here, 211, and if we scroll down to our project, you see that default dimensions 211 is already assigned. So it just allows the user to not even think about it. They create the project, the dimension's already there. Once they start transactions on or doing transactions on this project, it will flow through, assuming that the account structure is set up correctly to allow for that project dimension. So that was default dimensions and copying onto the records. And this would work the same way if you were creating an item or maybe a customer or a record. If as long as you have that dimension active and it's just within your account structure, then it will pull in that project or whatever that dimension value is for that default dimension. So I want to go actually back to our account structure right here for this legal entity. So if I go to my ledger and take a look at my P&L account structure, I just want to show you guys what that account structure looks like right now. So the next part, derived dimension, kind of makes sense. So right here we have our P&L account structure. You can see that, based on whatever account in here I use, I can choose whatever business unit. And then we have our department, cost center. I have allow blanks for cost center, allow blanks for item group and project. But this is basically our string, right? A main account, a business unit, department, cost center, item group, project. So what we're going to look at now is the derived dimensions functionality and see how that is used in kind of conjunction with this account structure. So the first financial dimension is business unit. So I'm going to go to that financial dimension. Oops, that was bank account. And I'm going to click this derived dimensions right here. So here are my different derived dimensions. So basically when I click 001 as my derived dimension, then it will automatically populate 023 as the department and 010 as the cost center, as it's kind of following my same account structure over here. So let me just duplicate this tab so we can take a look at how this actually operates in a real world example. So I really think the best use you would get out of this is the offset to an open AP invoice journal. A lot of times people that are that are entering these invoices may not know what dimensions should be hit. And so this is how you can kind of set it up so you can guide them to the correct dimension. So once we get this set up, I'll enter a batch I have right here. Let's go to our lines. And once we get in our lines, I'm gonna enter a vendor and some fake invoice information. And once we get to the offset account, we'll see what it can do for us. So we'll click a vendor here, choose my aid supply company, put today's date, And we'll put $300. So right here, you're going to want to put your expense account in, right? So we'll put an expense account in starting with 6. So let's say this was a advertising expense. So this is where, if you blink, you might miss it. I'm going to choose my 001 business unit, which will fill in department and cost center automatically. So as you can see, the department, operations, and cost center, production, automatically got filled by choosing that business unit. If I want, I can delete this and change it currently. To finance, I can change this. So I want something else, administration, whatever is allowed within the account structure. Just for another quick purpose, I'm going to change my business unit to 002. It gives me 025 and 013 as my department and cost center. So again, if I want right now, I can change this to a different department. I can change this to a different cost center. So that is kind of the basic settings of what it is right now. If we go back to our derived dimensions, I'm going to choose this replace existing dimension values with derived values. So if I check this, then it will change basically this entire string. So if I change from a 001 to a 003, then it will change that department and cost center. So if we go back over here, let me just click off of this, give this a little refresh so it picks up that rule change. Okay, let's go back over here. So in my business unit, I'm going to select 01, and again, it populates in there. But let's say, oh, we didn't want to change it to 01. We actually want to change this to 003. It changes department and cost center automatically. So I think that's a nice feature to have clicked, because then you're always being consistent with what the derived dimension rule should be. So I highly suggest clicking this as part of your setup. Another thing is when you're adding a segment, or even after adding a segment, you can lock down and prevent changes. So right here, actually, let's say in department, I'm going to click on my department. I want to prevent value changes to department. So when we talked about account structures and how they can be pretty strict unless you go in and edit them and change them, this kind of gives you the way to also be strict, but change that really quickly and easily, depending on your business needs and how they change. So basically right now I have the department cannot change, right? So let me go back to our vendor invoice, and I'm just going to clear this out and give this a refresh too. So basically when I enter my, again, my business unit of 001, and I have this department, right? And let's just try to change this to 025 and click off of here. It's going to yell at me and saying it's not allowed due to the derived dimension rules. The only allowed value should be 23. So it doesn't allow me to change it, which is a nice powerful tool that I just set up really quickly. And once I change it back to 23, you can tell that it doesn't yell at me either. As you can see right here too, you can see what is valid based on your dimensions that you selected. So that's always a nice little thing to have up there. If we want, we can lock down the cost center too. So if we can prevent the changes on cost center, and let's change this again to a 003, so we'll change everything. So if I go back over here, change this to 03, it changes that. Let's say I want to change my cost center to 08 and click out of there. It's not going to let me because the cost center is now preventing changes. So I have to use the cost center 09. And again, for project purposes, that project that was created earlier, I go all the way to the bottom here. All right, just AXUG project, that is now a value that we created too. So not only does it copy to the record of that project, but the value of that financial dimension is also automatically created. So that's always a nice feature to have as well there. So that does it for the demo. Let me swap this. And here is our contact information. There's my email and also Jared's email and our website. We post a lot of blogs on there, and we, send out a lot of information. Like as Jared was saying, and we're very active with the D365 UG and AXUG community. So hope to meet some of you in person sometime soon. Without further ado, we have the Q&A. So Julie, if there's any questions, I guess, in the waiting, then let's fire them away. Julie, are you there? I see you're on mute.
We don't have any questions in the queue right now. Anybody? I just want to remind you while we're waiting for questions that you'll receive, oh, we've got one. Here we go. Can the derived dimensions be combined with the alias feature?
Alias feature. I am not, I have to be honest, I'm not sure what they mean by alias feature. So.
Oh. Well, Charlie, if you want to, Charlie, I will unmute you if that works, and then you can have a discussion about that. Charlie, you're unmuted, so you can ask your question.
All right, and I'm apologizing in advance because I'm at a Starbucks and might be some background noise here.
Yeah.
No worries.
But there's the ledger account alias, which basically allows you to type in something. It automatically defines your full account string. But I'm wondering if there's a way for you to combine the two, where you type in an alias and it pre-populates the first couple, and then allows you to update that using the derived dimensions. Just wondering, these are trying to combine two out-of-the-box scenarios to be a little bit more flexible. And I'm just wondering if the answer is no, that we don't have any experience using it that way, then maybe my question is invalid. But just wondering if there's a good use case for that.
Yeah, so I mean, I know there's the thing called financial dimension templates, which I've seen before. Is that what you're kind of referring to, where you select a certain template and then it populates those templates for you? It populates the dimensions for you?
So that's another case as well, but there's something that I actually just learned about called ledger aliases. And
okay.
when you're going to code, whether it's a ledger, a general ledger entry or an AP entry, whatever, you can just type in office supplies, and it auto-populates the full string for you. Just wondering if that's something that you could combine with the derived dimensions. So maybe it would populate the main account and the department, and then be flexible with the remaining derived accounts.
Yeah, it sounds like something we could probably combine. I definitely want to look into that. So yeah, well, I could reach out to you too on that. So yeah, that's a good question though. I'm sure there's probably some kind of precedent of which rule takes over, which one. And I'm definitely curious, if we put on prevent changes for one dimension, would that cause issues with that rule? That's what I'm kind of thinking of. Is there any conflicts that could occur? But yeah, I'll look into that. That's definitely interesting.
Yeah, and Charlie, feel free to send Chris an email, and you guys can connect on a further conversation about that. The next question is from the next question is from Michelle, and she asks, if a new dimension is created, is there an option to update existing rules, or will you need to update setup to include the new dimensions?
So you would need to update the setup to include that new dimension. As far as I know, there's no kind of periodic task to kind of add things. It's all kind of done manually. And so again, also I wanted to make a point that when you set up something like the default dimension, that happens from, you know, now and going forward. It's not going to retroactively assign a project dimension to all your projects that have been created previously. So, and I think that's pretty common with anything that's D365 or AX related. Nothing really ever happens retroactively. It's always at that point going forward at which you make that configuration change and then change that, and that for every transaction or new record created going forward.
Great. I hope that answers your question, Michelle. If it doesn't, just type in the question box, unmute me, and you can have a further discussion about it. Nope, she says thank you. So.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? No, they're not coming in. So I want to thank you, Chris and Jared, for being on the line today. And Chris is sharing his information here. So if you do have a follow-up question for either Chris or Jared, feel free to email them and they'll help you out and work through your question. So with that, I am going to wish you all a great weekend. It's Friday, guys, and I'm going to close the webinar. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.